Hi again, everybody, and welcome to the Business Spotlight Series. My name's Mark McNulty, president of Action Coach Bluegrass, and today I have Alex Vogt of Awry Brewing, one of the co-owners, as my guest. And today we're going to be talking about his business, his journey to business ownership, challenges, best practices, and share a peek into what it's really like to build and operate a business. Now, if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to like and subscribe so that you can get notifications when we drop new conversations just like this one. So Alex, welcome and thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, to help our viewers know about you, give us an overview of how this all happened, how you, with your partners, started a brewery.
Sure. So when I was in college, I got a taste for craft beer and I was brewing for a couple of years. I was a student at IU and I had the idea that maybe making craft beer would be cheaper than buying it, and it's not, but I had to learn that the hard way. I had a friend of mine at one point that was asking, he came over when I was brewing, was like, what, are you going to open a brewery? It's like, no. I was like, well, why not? And that's the first thing that kind of just kicked it off. A few years later, I met Tyler Martin at a local restaurant we were both serving at. And he had just turned 21 and just started to get into craft beer, found out I was brewing. And I'd been kicking around this idea of like, maybe I'll open a brewery someday. And then him and I started brewing. I taught him how to home brew. And from that point, we kind of started at it. That was 12 years ago, maybe a little better. We went through, I don't even know how many partners. You tell anybody you want to open a brewery and everyone's like, yeah, let's do that. And then when it comes to actually writing a business plan or trying to find money, then all of a sudden you get a lot of fair weather fans until about 8 years ago, we ended up meeting Tom. And his background actually was in corporate sales and running like big plants. So myself and Tyler came from, small restaurant background. By the time we had met Tom, I had already been professionally brewing. I started at Bluegrass Brewing Company in 2013. I was there for 3 years and then ended up most recently at Against the Grain. And I worked in the cellar and on the brew house for about a year, and then was promoted about a year after I was there to production manager. Shortly after that, Tyler actually came on as a brewer. So he and I were at Against the Grain. I was there 7 years. He was there for 6. And that's really where we kind of cut our teeth and learned more than just how to turn grain and water into beer, and learn more. What is the business side of beer? What does it actually mean to like making the beers? That's the easy part. But getting people to actually buy it and getting it so people even know that you have it, that's more the challenge. This year, we were looking at a brew house. A brewery was closing down. We thought we'd go look at the equipment, see if we could move it somewhere. And when we came to the space, we kind of looked around and we were like, this is kind of special here. There's some good energy about like just the space and where it is. And that's how we ended up on the corner of Barrett and Winter in Louisville. So we're 1025 Barrett Avenue. It's been a whole hell of a lot more than we ever anticipated. We knew it'd be hard, but then when the rubber meets the road, every business owner I've ever talked to in my life always says, you're going to forget something. You're going to forget something. I was like, we've been doing this for a decade. There's surely, I know we'll forget something, but it's not going to be major. It's always something major. It's always, hey, who are you doing to wash your towels? Like, holy crap, who thought about towels? So that's kind of the short story of how all this came together, or as short as I can make that.
Okay. How do you guys divvy up the roles and responsibilities?
To be perfectly honest, right now, we're kind of still working through that. So I have a background in brewing and a little bit in restaurant work, specifically back of the house. Tyler obviously has a background in brewing and restaurant, but more front of the house. And then Tom, his background is in management and oversight. I don't know if that's the right word, but back in books, the logistics of everything. So those are kind of our major roles as they kind of sit through. And then there's so many other hats that we didn't realize we need to be wearing. So we've kind of just started picking up here and there. So actually bookkeeping is something that Tom was like, hey, I got a handle on this. So he picked that up. I wanted to be a filmmaker in a past life. So I was like, you know what? I'll take care of the social media and marketing. And then Tyler kind of naturally stepped back behind the bar from years ago when we met and turned all that charisma back on to, turn somebody buying one beer into 2 beers a shot and maybe a side of fries before the end of the night.
Right. Tell me about your place. When we come there, what do we find?
So If you've been to any brew pub, you probably have an idea of how they feel, the whole ambiance. I kind of feel like a lot of brew pubs, especially nowadays, they really feel similar. So when we got here, our goal was we don't want that. We want specifically to feel like something very uniquely different from our branding all the way from our logo to the space itself. When you walk in, obviously, you know it's a brew pub because our brew house is sitting in the middle of the floor. It's kind of hard to miss, although some people do miss it. We have leaned really hard into, rather than the motifs of grain and hops and mash paddles and traditional stuff you see, we instead are leaning to try to showcase local artists. So we have an ongoing project right now with all of our dining room tables will eventually all be covered by a different local artist that comes in and just paints something up. We have 3 bathrooms, all are uniquely different, and each one was designed by each one of the owners. And then we had different local artists come in and put their own flair. The only guidelines that we give to anybody coming in is don't make this beer themed and don't have a bunch of hop cones sitting around, because we want to showcase that we're more than that. We're passionate about beer, but we are not singularly passionate. The 3 of us are all very different. And when you come in and see the space and feel it, you can feel the differences in each one of us, even if you don't know us.
Oh, that's cool. Who's your main audience? Who are your customers?
The demographic is fairly broad, 21 to 65. I think that's what Facebook tells us to market towards. I would say our actual main demographic is we are a neighborhood bar. We're learning that we've only been open for 3.5 months. Right. So we are very, very fresh. And when we first opened, our target audience, or who we thought we were going to grab, were all of the beer enthusiasts all over the city. All of those people show out to any new brewery that opens. But to get people returning, it's different. Those people come back, but there's 28 breweries in Louisville. So to have those same people come back night after night is not really the audience. Instead, what we're finding is our neighborhood. We're right between Germantown and the Highlands. Mm-hmm. And we are drawing from both Germantown and the Highlands. And almost every night at this point, we have somebody else who comes in who's like, I live right around the corner. I'm so happy this is here. Somebody who's not necessarily a craft beer. Everybody at this point drinks craft beer to some degree, but obviously not everybody's going to every brewery release of everything that's happening. So we're kind of leaning into that demographic. We want to be not in a neighborhood, but actually part of the neighborhood and part of the community here. So that's who we're targeting as of right now.
Okay. How many brews you got on tap?
Currently, we have 11 that are on. We have 12 taps total. 1 is a dedicated non-alcoholic. We have friends that are either recovering alcoholics or friends of friends that want to still hang out and don't feel good going to a bar and drinking water next to their friends. So we made a point to carry non-alcoholic options for people. Of those, of the beers that are on tap, we make them all. Some are in collaboration with other local breweries. We have a lot of collaborations set up with out-of-state breweries. We've made a lot of friends through the years. But yeah, everything, with the exception of our non-alcoholics, everything that you're drinking at Awry is made on the other side of the brick wall.
Okay. So how'd you come up with that name?
It's kind of a fun story. So we're all actually Hoosiers. We're all Indiana boys that for a long time wanted to open in Indiana. We felt that Southern Indiana was underserved. And every time that we talked to somebody, people would get big ideas, and then somebody with a whole lot more money comes kind of right behind us and scoops it up. And it was so frustrating. It always felt, we were always like making progress. We're 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. I was like, geez, like what is happening here? So eventually our original name was Wrong Side, to kind of play on, we're on the other side of the bridge.
Yeah.
And then when we started looking in Louisville, Tom coming in later was kind of like, I want to be a part of what this name is. I was like, well, that makes sense. You're a third of this business. Let's have some input. So we started kind of talking. We're like, how do we embody that idea of like wrong side, being on the wrong side, it seems every time. And also, within this calendar year, we had 3 deals fall through before we got the space we're in now. Okay. And so we're kind of just like flipping through the dictionary, looking at stuff. And somehow we came across the word Awry. I was like, man, that really does embody us though, doesn't it? Something always goes sideways. And we always persevere. We didn't have any option. You get knocked down, you got to get back up and just keep on getting after it. We might be dumb for it. Time will tell. But we figured if the chips are going to continue to fall that way, let's lean into it and just meet it head on.
Okay, awesome. How are you marketing your new location?
It's a lot of guerrilla marketing. So social media, that's our biggest thing. Instagram is our biggest following, with Facebook not too far behind it. Doing a little bit of, we've done like one paid promotion. We don't have a whole lot of money to throw into marketing right now. So Tom still has his day job. He works for a printing company.
Okay.
So with that, we are lucky to be able to print things like flyers and handouts. Our artist that has done our logo and everything is very, very talented, and he's very, very eclectic. Our stuff doesn't look like anybody else's out there. So when we print something, even it's like we have trivia flyers out right now that I literally, Tom printed at the office, and I took a staple gun and walked down Barrett Avenue and just put them up on telephone poles. We are very, very boots on the ground kind of. We got 3 guys running it. We have 1 employee currently that works in the kitchen. So it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of telling people we're here and kind of being honest with the people when we get them, and being like, what you see is what you get. We are very, very authentic. And that's kind of our marketing push, is our authenticity and with the resources we have at hand.
Other than the hunt for real estate, what are some of the other challenges just of opening a business and becoming a business owner that you had to fight through to get to where you're now open?
A big one for us is licensing. Alcohol is very heavily regulated, not only in the state, but federally. So we have a federal license. We have 4 or 5 different state and or local alcohol licenses that are trying to traverse all of that, of like, oh, okay, so you get a beer license. Like, well, no, you get a beer by the drink license, and you get a beer by the package license. Well, really, that's a beer and malt beverage. That way it doesn't just constrict you to what the definition of beer is. But if you want to have alcohol, that's another license. If, you want to do that on Sunday? Well, that's 2 more licenses for each one of those. You have to have a brewer's license. You have to have a federal brewer's notice. It's a lot of red tape. And that, I would say, has been a really, really big struggle. We have gotten through it. We have a lot of friends that we have great lawyers who've helped us traverse that. The other side, I think, is really trying to learn the flow of when we're physically in here, when we're not, what are the things that, like, there's no off days ever. And I don't think there's going to be an off day ever again, or at least not for a while. I say that not to sound, I don't really lament it. It's a thing where I kind of feel like I've been thinking about this every day of my life for the past 12 years anyways. Now the stakes are just kind of higher. I will say I am married and have 2 kids, and that work-life balance can be tricky sometimes.
Right.
And that's a super important thing. If I had to tell anybody opening a business, one would be, are you sure? And if you are, if you have a partner, are they sure? So, yeah.
Any lessons you've learned that you'd want to pass along to people about having business partners? Because that can be a challenge.
It is. My business partners are wonderful. We fight more than my wife and I fight. But when I say we fight, we always leave the table with some type of an agreement. We are level-headed, or at least that we strive to be. And that's really, really, really important. If you talk to anybody that goes and has partners in business at all, so many people will be like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And that's one option. But the other is, I don't think there's a single person, at least in the industry that I'm in, I don't think there's a single person who has everything figured out. And I think if you can have a couple of diverse people, have different, ways of looking at things, you will ultimately be stronger about it. You're going to reach more people. You have a broader spectrum of what you can even, or just a broader scope of what's happening. I'm a very opinionated person. My partners would tell you that. I get very frustrated with things. I am not right all the time. I'm never going to be right all the time. And having partners is very, very beneficial in that aspect.
Right.
That's a double-edged sword sometimes, but it's ultimately any of the strife or the struggle, I think, is outweighed by the collaborative effort and where we end up landing. And it helps us. One of the big things for us is we always want to feel very welcoming to everybody. We want anybody to walk in to feel like they have a spot here. And I think that's hard to do if there's one person trying to figure out what that means. I think you need a collective of some sort to, at least that, that being our main goal. It helps to have more than one person trying to figure out what that means.
Right. So what's next that
Well,
you could share with our listeners?
Yeah. So we have a lot of collaborations and stuff happening. Honestly, we have tonight in like 10, 15 minutes, we're getting ready for our first private party. We have a young professionals group coming in, meet and greet kind of thing. We're excited about that, a little nervous, if I'm being completely honest. So we have some Christmas parties and stuff where people have reached out to us. Our local council member wants to host his Christmas party here. Like, oh, cool. Okay, that's really neat. The LIBA Christmas party, which is the Louisville Independent Business Association. We became members of that, and they were like, hey, we want to throw a party at your place. We're like, that's very exciting for us. So those are the things happening, as well as we're doing all the usual suspects of events, trivia, things like that. But we are also trying to lean into some weird eclectic things. Myself and Tyler play Dungeons and Dragons. We started playing over COVID and don't get to play anymore because we're always here. So we have met so many regulars and just kind of struck up conversations, and we've talked about that, and we're like, well, why not do that here? So now we're like, well, there is a whole community of D&D nerds out there that are in their 30s and like to go drink beer.
Yep.
So we're going to start hosting nights like that. Things where you can come out and go sit in a corner with your friends and be a nerd and fight for 10 dragons for a few hours and drink some beers. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a D&D themed beer sooner than later.
Okay. So what's your big 3-year goal, if you can share that?
3-year goal would be to really have a good, solid setting in this neighborhood, to be that spot where, we become synonymous with the neighborhood around. People coming here. We're one of the few places in our neighborhood that has a parking lot. So hopefully if we can draw people and be like, oh yeah, let's go check that out, and really cement our place as the neighborhood brew pub. Past that, we have a rooftop that we would love to put a bar on top of. Okay. And maybe 5 years out, maybe 3 years, we'll see. Maybe open up another tap room, but in Indiana.
On the wrong side.
On the wrong side. And if I have it my way, it'll be called Wrong Side. So that, and then, I would say definitely getting into local distribution. Tyler and I came from production. When we were at Against the Grain, we were servicing at our height 21 different states and 13 countries. I never want to do that again. It sounds really great for people, but you sacrifice a lot, not only in yourself, but in product and what you're trying to do. I would much rather have 10 local draft accounts of places that we like to go to. So, we put a lot of care into our liquid. We put a lot of time and effort. And we want to make sure that what we are selling to other people is also being taken care of. Nothing hurts worse than selling a keg of beer that you put so much time, you love this beer, and then you go taste it and it's dirty draft lines and it's being served warm and it's just somebody else has destroyed what you poured so much time into.
Right.
Sorry, long-winded. I apologize.
No, great answer. I like that. So you talked about collaboration. So what's an example of a collaboration?
So we actually yesterday released a collaboration with Monic, another local brewery. Collaborations can mean so many different things in different ways, but ultimately it's the idea of having another brewery or really another creative, and doesn't even have to be a brewery, it doesn't have to be a business, but to bring in somebody else's ideas and let's sit and take a little bit of what they're wanting, a little bit of what we're wanting, and see if we can't make something special. See if we can't make something, a little different or unexpected or very much expected. It's if we go and brew a beer with somebody who is notorious for doing giant IPAs that are super hop forward, and we do that with them, That's awesome because that's not exactly what we do. That pushes us outside of our comfort zone and lets us rely on their expertise in that. Likewise, if we do something with that same brewery and do something in the total opposite direction of a super traditional German lager, maybe that pushes them outside of their comfort zone and us. We have a small system. So the people that have reached out to us are kind of like, all right, well, what do you want to do? We can do whatever you want. You guys are new. And we're like, sky's the limit. You can dream it. We can try it. We are, as far as beer wise, we are low risk, high reward. Okay. And worst case, if we have to dump something, we can chalk it up as experience and write it off on our taxes, hopefully, and go from there. But the other end of that, if we stumble onto something fantastic, then we don't have to take a $5,000 swing and hope it works. We can take a $300 swing. So yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. You'd mentioned that a couple of times. I wanted to make sure our viewers knew what you meant by that.
So a lot of jargon in this industry. I apologize.
Yeah. And it means different things. I mean, in the bourbon world, a lot of times it's with barrels, finishings in other barrels. So I just want to make sure people knew. So that's really cool that you're even working with the other distilleries and brewers to come up with unique products. So that's awesome. Covered a lot of ground here. So I've got 4 last questions for you, just real quick. First answer off the top of your head works. So first one is, what is your key to success?
Perseverance, always getting back up. I would argue, I'm not sure if I am successful yet, but not letting it get me down, because really I think that's all we can do right now. I had a friend in yesterday and we were actually talking about this, and it's just never stop trying. The minute you stop trying, that's when you fail. But as long as you don't stop, you're never really going to fail.
Right. Somebody thinking about starting a business, not necessarily even a brewery, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
Know your target audience.
Okay.
Figure out if you're selling something, figure out who you're selling it to. Before, like, if you have concepts, figure out who you're selling it to. I know a lot of people that have great ideas, and I will always ask them, okay, who's buying it? Like, oh, tons of people. I'm like, no, specifically, who is buying it? If you know that, then you can actually work towards something.
Good advice. Thank you. What's a book you're reading now or have read recently that you would recommend to other business owners?
I actually have just started rereading Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. If you've never read it, it's fantastic. I came from kitchens before I was in the brewing world, and it's insightful in a way of just, it takes a lot of passion to cook. It takes a lot of passion to brew. So yeah, I actually just started rereading that last night.
Okay, great. If you had to choose one area of your business to just focus on and improve starting tomorrow, what would that be?
If everything else was running and doing just fine, didn't have to worry about anything, it's always going to be back into the beer. We have great beer, but if I could spend every hour of every day in the brewery tweaking something or researching or figuring something out, that's my big passion.
Okay. All right. And then I've got one more question, but before we get to that, tell our listeners, where can they follow you, find out more about you, know what's going on, hear about events? Where are you online that they can find out about you?
We're at Awry Brewing on Instagram, Awry Brewing on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel that's not very active yet, so we're kind of building up a cache of videos and stuff. So we will be on YouTube. And then physically, I don't know if this goes out to just the Louisville people, but we're in the Highlands on Barrett Avenue, the old Monkey Wrench, which I hate saying, but that's how people know us. We're for now.
Yeah. So. And when I saw the address, my first thought was, I wonder if that was the Monkey Wrench.
Yep, that's exactly. Yeah, we have the old Monkey Wrench sign still upstairs. Okay. All 3 of us had some type of history with the Monkey Wrench, and Denny Humphrey, who's the former owner of other local businesses, he's a buddy, and he's been very supportive.
Okay, great. Last question for you. What inspires you the most today?
Today, I think seeing different perspectives of things that have been around for a long, long time. I have a buddy of mine that has recently turned me on to a handful of different content creators, video creators. And he's like, hey, you should check this out. And looking at things that I've looked at forever, but just through a different lens, has let me come back into my own business and look at, like I said, I've been professionally brewing almost 11 years. And now I'm looking at it through a different lens, which is really exciting and inspiring because a lot of this feels like it's brand new for the first time again, but in a way where I got a little bit going on for me now. And that feels good. That paired with every time I serve someone a beer and they're like, that's really good. That's really inspiring. It's all the sweat, tears, and blood that have gotten dumped into this. And then someone's like, wow, that's really good. Like, I really like that. It's like, cool. We did it. We did what we said we would do.
Awesome. I like that. That's great. You get to see people's reaction and response to the product that you've created. That's great. All right. Well, awesome, Alex. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, This has been Alex Vogt, co-owner of Awry Brewing, which is located at 1025 Barrett here in Louisville, the old Monkey Wrench. And I want to thank you, Alex, and I want to thank you all of our viewers and listeners for being with us today. This has been Coach Mark with Action Coach Bluegrass. One more business owner spotlight series in the books for you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Cheers.